Good morning. Please be seated. Well, welcome back to everyone after our Chuseok break. Hope everyone is well rested and enjoyed the good weather that we've had and been outside. So we're going to get on with assembly today by moving straight on to our house competition results from the week previous. Okay, so we have these results coming in from Year 7 and 8 Mathletics. We can see Goman did extremely well in that event. And then Georgie doing very well in these other events, winning all of them, the football, the spelling bee, and the quiz. So well done to all those teams, doing well in house competition, taking us on to the results for the accumulation so far. Still lots to play for. Okay, now we do have a little bit of a technical hitch today, but that won't make any difference to people in the PAC. But for those of you who are watching the recorded version, sorry about the technical problems, but nevertheless, it should all be the same for you when you get to watch it, hopefully tomorrow. Okay, so Ms. Elford is going to be delivering the main address today, and our theme for this half of the term is positive emotion. So I'd please like everyone to welcome Ms. Elford to the microphone. Thank you.
I'm just looking for my notes, which have vanished from here.
Oh dear.
I've stolen them.
Oh, thank you. Right, slight technical hitch there. Right, good morning, everyone. And it's a very special week for us this week, as, of course, this week we are going to commemorate our 10th anniversary. But today, as Mr. Waterson says, I'd like to talk to you about positive emotion, but in particular, the idea of friendship and how important that is. Now, what I want us to think about for a moment is how we respond and how we react when we see the news. And we're going to just see a very short clip now, which was some events in Afghanistan in August.
Could we have predicted every single scenario and every single breach around the perimeter of the airport with only a couple of thousand troops on the ground? Absolutely, there are changes that happen. So plans are terrific and we take them seriously, but they are not and never have been perfectly predictive.
Okay, I'm sure that some of you remember those scenes, and I've put some pictures up there to also show very clearly what was going on for many, many people. So I want us to think for a minute as to why so many people wanted to flee. Remember, the Taliban had last ruled in Afghanistan in the 1990s, and as we can see from those pictures, many people were very fearful because it soon became very obvious in August that the Taliban were going to seize control. And this was made even more likely as the US and her allies pulled out. So for many people, they were considerably worried about what life was going to be like once the Taliban seized control again. I want you to think, how would you have reacted if you had had a friend who was in Afghanistan at that time, and you knew that your friend would want to leave and needed to leave? So how would you have reacted? What would you have done? So what were people worried about? Why was it so dangerous? And why did people desperately want to leave? So what was life going to be like once more? Now, I know in this school music is extremely important. And I think it's important at the moment to look at the Afghanistan National Institute of Music. Now, this, over the last 10, 15 years, has really established itself once more. It's been praised for bringing music to both boys and girls. And under the Taliban last time, music was, certainly Western classical music was banned. And of course, girls and boys couldn't be together in classes and so forth. And this music school was very, very important because it had the first all-female orchestra in Afghanistan, and they had performed, not just in Afghanistan, but in other parts of the world too. And they were very, very concerned that once the Taliban seized control, their lives could be in danger. And indeed, they were right, because that music school is now closed. Those students are all fearful, they're very concerned, they've had to leave their instruments behind, and they have gone into hiding in their various villages and so forth. But they know that if they were known to be part of that school, that they would be in serious problems. So what about girls' education? And what about education in general? Let's just think of a number of things about education and what had happened to education in Afghanistan. When the Taliban were last removed, education had begun to get back on its feet and it had begun to make enormous progress. Things like literacy rates had improved and so forth. UNESCO actually tells us that in 2018, there were 10 million children enrolled in schools in Afghanistan. But in 2001, there had only been 1 million. During that last period, the number of girls in primary schools had increased from almost 0 to 2.5 million. And the female literacy rate had nearly doubled in a decade to 30,000. So what's happened now? Well, the Taliban have now excluded girls from Afghan secondary schools, with only the boys and male teachers allowed to go back into the classrooms. And as you can see there, many of the girls that the BBC managed to speak to were really deeply upset about that. And it has been an immensely disturbing time for women and girls in general. And young women have also been told that they would be, which at first seemed quite surprising, but think about this. They were told by the Taliban that they would be allowed to study at universities. But then came the catch. They'd only be able to do so if they were not with the men. In other words, they were in separate classes. But it soon became very obvious that that wasn't going to happen. The poor funding in universities in Afghanistan, the lack of facilities and so forth, is going to make it almost impossible for universities to operate separate classes for men and women. And also, if you stop girls from going to secondary schools, how on earth are girls going to get into higher education in the first place? And interestingly, the Women's Affairs Ministry was replaced by the Ministry of Vice and Virtue. And they employ various police, Taliban fighters to enforce the law in the streets, very similar to what had happened before. And so any women out on the streets without a male guardian or dressed inappropriately have been subject to beatings. So many people's fears have really been founded. We know that many professional women were those who were out and about at the airports trying to get onto the flights. Let's look at sport. Sport has been very, very difficult in the past. Look at this statement from the Minister of Sport. Let's look at some examples of particular sports. Cricket had, for example, had really grown in Afghanistan. The male team had been very successful. The women's team was also doing incredibly well. But for that women's team, now they have gone into hiding as well. They've had to leave everything behind. In villages where they were known to play cricket, those girls have been subject to all sorts of abuse and so forth. And in fact, one person reported that the Taliban had told them, threatened them, saying, "We may come kill you if you try to play cricket again." So, Afghanistan's women cricketers are hoping to escape Taliban rule, like the 50 female athletes who were evacuated by the Australian government in August. Football's governing body, FIFA, has said it's negotiating the complete evacuation of footballers and other athletes from Afghanistan. In September, 41 Afghan refugees arrived in the UAE from Tajikistan, and that included 25 members of the Afghan girls cycling team. Female players from Afghanistan's junior national soccer team have also managed to get across the border into Pakistan. So therefore, for many people who were fleeing and trying to escape, you can see that their fears have been founded. Life has certainly not improved for them. So think for a minute. And you're going to meet this young woman in a minute, Haseen Fatima Amini. How would you feel if one of your school friends was there? She was in Afghanistan. Now, to her, her friends were fundamentally important, and she really needed them. And look at those things she's saying about her friends there. We're now going to meet some of her friends that were to be so important for her. Her friends and Amini herself were all members of UWC in Mostar. And so have a look at these 6 very remarkable young people. They turned to support their friend. And why did they have to do it? Well, Amini is a member of Afghanistan's Hazara minority. She was known to be an outspoken advocate for women's rights. This 19-year-old also identifies as a Shiite Muslim. She was educated, as I said, at UWC. She volunteered at the US Embassy in Kabul and had publicly criticized the Taliban. So for her and her family, these were all reasons to fear the Taliban. Earlier this year, Amini and her 17-year-old brother tried to obtain visas for Pakistan. But, like everyone else, the speed of the Taliban's advance meant that they were unable to get into Pakistan. So, on Saturday, August the 14th, she reached out to her friends and asked for their help. So what did these friends do for her? Well, they were determined to do something. They were determined to help her. For them, it wasn't, they were just going to say, "Oh, isn't this sad? I don't think there's anything we can do." They are actually going to try and get her out of the country. They were communicating all the time on their WhatsApp group. They tried to see if they could still get her on a flight to Pakistan, but the Taliban advance stopped that. They initially tried to get into Kabul airport, but all commercial flights were closed down and cancelled. And so what they did was they then started to do emails, phone calls, visa applications. They chased down every lead they could possibly come up. They went through their friends from school, they went through other contacts they had, and they took turns speaking with Amini, supporting her, telling her, of course, they would try to get her out. For instance, they decided in the end that the only way she was going to get out was to actually try and risk it and go to the airport. But they couldn't get her on the list for planes through the Dutch, German, and Polish authorities. But these friends did not give up. They had contacted previously a European MP, and on Thursday, August the 19th, this MP, who long advocated for victims of terrorism, got in touch with them. The Spanish government, contacted early in the week, advised that Amini was now going to be on their list, and an email would come with the date of her evacuation flight. 3 days later, on Sunday, August the 27th, the email arrived. Tell her and the family to come to the Abbey Gate, wearing red and yellow scarves, and to shout España when nearby the soldiers. Read the instructions. It was clear that Spain would not just take Amini, but also her 2 brothers and her mother. This was a huge achievement, but of course, they still had to get her out. And as some of you will have seen on television footage and so forth, there was 3 main gates to get through, and it was very, very dangerous. In fact, at one point, there was even a terrorist bomb that went off on one of the gates. So it was incredibly dangerous to get through. But she made it, and she got through, and she actually went onto that plane. The family got that permission to board that Spanish military plane. So they had achieved it. Amini and her family are now in Spain, and they are seeking refugee status there, asylum. But those friends have still not given up. They know how difficult it is for her and her family. They have left everything behind. They know how difficult it is for them to put their life together, but also the feelings of guilt that she has, because she's got out, but lots of other people are remaining. But our 6 friends that were so important to her have also gained enormously from this. As they said, that as they talk about that, every refugee has a story. They have really begun to understand and find out this. Amini herself has not given up. She wants to go back to Afghanistan. She wants to continue her education. She wants to be in a position to go back and make a difference in her country in the future. So I want all of you to think about all these emotions that will have been going on at this time. If it had been your friend, would you have been upset, but then said, oh dear, there's nothing I can do? Or would you have tried everything that you could to try and help your friend? You have opportunities, you have contacts, you have the ability to make a difference, and you have the ability to support each other all the time. So I ask you to seize the opportunity and to value those friendships that you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Oldfield. And we're going to finish with a treat. We've got Amy Kim, Year 11 Molchat, who's going to play a lovely French piece by Poulenc, Novelette in E minor. Can we give her a round of applause, please?
Thank you very, very much to Amy and to Ms. Oldfield for the address today. And thank you to our audience here in the PAC for their attention. And I do hope everyone enjoys this when they get to see the recorded version. Okay, everyone, do have a good day and a good week. Thank you.